I'm going to read a short sutta from a book titled The Island. It's an anthology of the Buddha's teachings on Nibbana. Because I want to drive a thought home, I want to drive a nail in. And so I'll read it and then we'll talk about it. It says, enraptured with lust, engaged or enraged with anger, blinded by delusion, overwhelmed with mind ensnared, people aim at their own ruin, at the ruin of others, at the ruin of both. And they experience mental pain and grief. But if lust, anger, and delusion are given up, one aims neither at one's own ruin, nor the ruin of others, nor the ruin of both. And they experience no mental pain and grief. This is Nibbana, visible in this life, immediate, inviting, attractive, and comprehensible to the wise. So, the first point I'd like to make is that the Buddha taught that we don't have to wait until we die before we achieve a peace. That we can do it right here in this lifetime, in this life, in this very life, while we're still toiling in samsara. Now, there's lots of people who express their impotency with certain fetters or certain can't even think of the word now. Certain unwholesome actions. That wasn't the word I was looking for, but that makes you understand what we're talking about. They say that they have trouble ridding themselves of a particular behavior. They want to, but they have trouble. So the first thought, or the first process in changing the way we do things is understanding that we do things because it's habitual. You see, we don't understand that it's not because there's something unwholesome that has a power over us or a spell on us, but we do it because we've always done it that way. That's why it's called an habitual tendency. That one of the things we do, one of the things we can use as a spotlight, as an aha to our crisis, is to see that every time this happens, I go this way with it. I do this thing with it. I say this thing. I feel this way. Habitually, right? So it's a habit. Nothing more. It's not a curse. It's not a spell. It's just a habit. That every time this happens, this is the way I react to it. Every time this happens, this is the way I react to it. So then it's just a matter of understanding how to break the habit. How to break the habit. How to abandon the tendency. The one thing we can't do and won't work is to wait for the experience to come around again to see if we can do something different. You know, we can even affirm that the next time this happens, I'll do something different. I'll be different. But we're so practiced at doing it a certain way that it happens, it appears that it happens automatically. You know, I don't know what overcame me, I just did this thing. No, you thought about it before you did it, but you're so good at doing it. You're so good at doing it. Not because this is your nature or your inherent desire. You're good at doing it because you've been doing it for so many years. That's it. And our remedy is to rewire neuroplasticity, rewire the mind and the brain so that we have another default to go to when this thing happens. So we first have to consider the unwholesome action that we're trying to rid ourselves of. That's the honest thing. It doesn't work, or it doesn't matter how good we are at the good things we do. What matters is how good we are at abandoning the unwholesome things that we do. So we've got to first focus on what it is in our behavior that we consider that we're our own self-regulator. It's not about anybody else, it's about us, it's about me. What is it that I want to abandon, to avoid as far as behavior or reaction or response is concerned? And then set about to install that behavior in consciousness by every day reminding myself, going over how I'm going to express myself the next time that happens, the next time someone says that to me, the next time someone does that to me. How do I really want to respond? And then in the role-playing of mine, I set up the example, I set up the situation that I never seem to be able to come out on the better side of, doing the thing I want to do. And I set it up, just like it happened the last time, with all of the behaviors that the other people or the other person brought to me. And I see myself, I construct myself in a way that I see me responding the way wholesomely, the way I want to respond when those situations present themselves. And I just relive it. I see it, I see myself acting wholesomely, whatever that means in the situation, and I just go over it in my mind, over and over again, over and over again, rewiring the brain. And what we experience is, as we develop a different habit for responding to that particular situation, we find that we begin to demonstrate the ability, which then gives us the confidence to know that we can be different in this. Again, our problem is usually that we will wait until it happens the next time. The next time this happens, I promise I'll do it differently. And then I don't think about it anymore. So the next time it happens, I go to default. I go to my habitual tendency. Because I haven't broken the habit by developing another habit. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about breaking the habit by developing a different habit for the same situation. Seeing myself living that moment and acting the way I really know I can act. Okay?
Since Sunday, I've been working on my conceit.
Okay.
And I'm coming from the thought of feeling or thinking I have this ability to stay in the present moment, and I have ample evidence of getting upset or frustrated at practicing in that moment. And what I would like to get better at now is being a loving presence is becoming more and more important for how I like to be in the world. Mm-hmm. And I don't have the insight or the understanding at this point to understand why I run around being frustrated, angry, and feeling my abilities are at a certain level, but as soon as something happens, my breath contracts or I hold on to things, and mm-hmm. the difficulty of letting go is still a work in progress of what that means for me.
Okay. So remember, we talk about abandoning unwholesome behaviors, habitual tendencies that we consider unwholesome. If I spend my time going around looking for the reasons that I do what I do, I have not taken my mind off of what I do. So that's the first thing. I'm still focused on my unwholesome behavior. I'm trying to determine why I do it. This is a process that may work, and it has worked for some people, but it takes a long time because you're focused on the behavior that you're trying to abandon. So I say I want to be a loving person. That's my anthem. I say I want to be a loving person. Then the first thing I got to do is to understand what a loving person does. How do I capture the essence of a loving person? How do I feel, or am I able to identify a loving person when I meet one? How do I know what a loving person is? So the first thing I do is to insinuate what a loving person does. How do I recognize? How do I identify a loving person? And then in my meditation, I begin to again visualize that behavior. What does a loving person do? How does a loving person identify themselves? Well, the first thing we know is a loving person won't hit me. A loving person won't scream at me. Won't be derogatory towards me. A loving person will make me feel welcome, make me feel good, make me feel like I belong to the tribe. Yeah? So then I see myself doing the things that I've identified a loving person is and does with something else, with a system. And I take that out into the world. And the one thing that a loving person doesn't do is to become disappointed because no one thinks they're a loving person. Right? So you have this fortitude that says, in spite of how people receive me, I am going to stick to my game plan. I am going to be a loving person. Because that's usually where we lose it. Right? As soon as the person doesn't respond the way we think they should, then we give that up and we go into our own habitual tendency. So, but what we're talking about is the process. How does the process work the quickest? And that is to practice it. I got good at my bad stuff because I practiced it. That's how I got good at it. It wasn't that the stuff is so powerful, such a, influence on me that, but it's when I start looking back in my life, in my lifetime, I start seeing that, well, I always did this. I got good at it because I practiced it. Yeah. So now it's a matter of developing a different practice, a different way of behaving in the situation. And again, don't wait until it happens to do it, but practice it so that when it does occur, it'll be, oh. So the Buddha said that mind is chief. Mind made are we. What we think about becomes the inclination of our mind. What we think about. So when I'm dealing with anger, or when I'm dealing with conceit, or when I'm dealing with any unwholesome emotion or thought, I do a lot of thinking about that on my downtime. It doesn't just come up in the moment. I'm not just angry when someone is angry at me or has treated me badly. I have lots of angry thoughts, all by myself. They're there. Okay, so we must develop a practice, develop a game plan. And that's how it works. That's how we change things. And we have to be careful. I said again, the biggest trap is thinking that when I'm different, you're going to treat me different. That's not the case. I might be hugged and I might be welcomed, but I might not be. But the thing is, I've got to make the decision to say, no matter what they do or say, I am going to act the way I think is responsible. And stick to it. Mm-hmm. And when we fail, to continue to ask for the experience so we can get better at it. Usually we keep running away from it. We keep trying to avoid it. But you only avoid things by changing the way the things manifest in reality. That's how I avoid it, no matter what you do. And if you notice in the suttas, the Buddha works with his disciples in this way. He makes sure that no matter what the other individual does to the disciple doesn't lose his love and appreciation for that person. So you have these examples of him having discourse with a disciple and asking him or telling them how they should behave, even when people hate them, even when people say bad things about them. How would you behave? I will not let my mind be affected. I will act and have thoughts of loving kindness for this person. And beginning with that person, have loving thoughts and loving kindness for everyone else in the whole world. No matter what they say, no matter what they do, this is my promise. This is how I'm going to be. I can't make anyone else do anything. I can't make anyone else behave, but I can make me behave. And that's the training. That's the training. To remember that people are just going to be people. And understand this, the people we're talking about, don't come to Dharma. You know, they may have another practice, they may not have another practice, but they are not practicing what you're practicing. So don't expect them to behave the way you expect yourself, the way you're training yourself to behave. A part of the realization is that truth. That no matter how much I love you, no matter how many hugs I want to give you, no matter how much money I want to give you, no matter how much time I want to give you, that doesn't mean you're going to like me and respect me. Or say the things that I want you to say, the soft things that I want to hear from you, the respectful things that I want to hear from you. Just doesn't mean that. And I have got to understand that I am saying what I am about, not what you're about. And the only way we test that is by holding on to our promise, even when the other person is yelling and screaming. To say, I will not yell and scream. I will not treat you unlovingly. I will treat you with all of the kindness and love that I have. Even when you're screaming and yelling, even when you're pushing and shoving, I am not going to get angry at you. I am going to have my mind unaffected by what you say and what you do. And that's how we change the world. Okay? What I do know from my own training, from my own work, is that once you establish an honest endeavor to find those unwholesome things, those pockets of unwholesomeness inside that influence the way you think and how you treat other people, you will remember things from childhood that you haven't thought about in 40 years, 50 years, that will come up because you're looking for them. You're asking for them. And they will give you the reasons why your intentions are set the way they are. And remember, what you want to do is not to judge yourself because of what you find. It's to forgive yourself because of what you find. Because those habits, those thoughts, those grooves were planted in you when you were 6, 5, 7, 3, 2, 20. They're not who you are now, they're who you were. And they come to revisit you like Scrooge in the Ghost of Christmas Past. You know? They're not you. So, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Michelle.
So that's right on the edge of what I was about to ask you is, so where do the habitual tendencies come from, since they're not our nature? From our parents. They come from our learning, the way we've learned to be. So how did we learn to be? Most of us were not blessed with a functional relationship. Most of us did not have a proper guide, a proper teacher. You know, we learned our bad habits from the grown-ups that were around us. The way they acted was the way we thought we should act when we are big enough to act that way, you know. So we learned from our mom and dad, our guidance counselors, our youth ministers, the bully that lives down the street. We learned from lots of people. And they learned from lots of people. And they learned from lots of people. But in every time there was also
a person or people who were walking around saying, okay, now here's another way to do this. But unfortunately for us, we're not gifted with the truth of those other paths. So we sort of lived in this isolated cocoon of America, and we only had one choice. So, and it worked for some, but it didn't work for most. That's all I'm going to say about that.
This has been so helpful to me. It has lifted a great burden from me.
Thank you.
In that there are a few things in my life for which I have never been able to forgive myself. And what I'm hearing today is that who I am now can forgive those persons, because they occurred at different ages, because they are not who I am now.
Mm-hmm. That's the truth. That's a fact.
That's very helpful.
Okay, great. Okay. Oh, yeah, okay.
You know, one of the things that about the habitual tendencies, somehow my father used to, tell us when I was little that it doesn't matter whether everyone against you, but if you know that that is truth for yourself, that you just, have to do it. Mm-hmm. So I was 9 years old. I think somehow whole class had some idea, and I was just different. I had a different idea. So I said, if it is 99, say no, and if I'm right, I am going to be that, right? And so now I came home, and we always report back to what we did daily. And now when I'm thinking, if my father told me, oh, you should not saying that I maybe killed that idea. Mm-hmm. But ever since that, I'm always, until now, I got into many, many troubles because of, I'm just holding on to my own truth. Mm-hmm. But I think somehow having that center, that filter through whoever, teachers, whatever, all these, and it could be. So that's one habit. It's like one of the habits that I think it's good. Mm. But I mean, of course, it's very difficult to go through life with keep, going against it, but then still there. But I think it worked out that way.
Okay. It doesn't work out for a lot of people.
You got to work hard to make it work.
Well, remember the idea about truth is that it's your truth, but it may not be the other guy's truth. And our conceit is developed when we feel that our truth is better than your truth. And confrontation and conflict evolve because then once I think that my truth is, once I feel that my truth is better than or more authentic than your truth, then I begin to try to change your mind about your truth. Just like the 99 people in your class try to change your mind. We try to change the minds. Well, the practice is that once I share my truth with you and you say, no, that's okay because this is my truth, this is what I believe, that as opposed to being attached to my truth, I say, okay.
Yeah, my truth has been going through many changes.
Yeah, it does. The truth that you fought for when you were with the 99 people in the 9th grade have changed 120 times since then. And once we see that what I fought for, I have a whole different opinion about now. Then we stop fighting. So we stop fighting and we just start listening. And we appreciate the opportunity to hear other points of view. But we realize that that's all it is another point of view. Just like mine. Mine is not the truth. Mine is just my opinion. That's all.
I think that it's not, that I am, thank you for adding that. And on top of that is always, I'm not afraid to change my mind when it's wrong. And then I could say, and then people say, oh, you said this. And how come you do this? Well, right now, that wasn't,
Right.
So I see myself at every stage that how I really thought that was right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Yeah.
Continue. So now getting much better at it.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Yes.
To someone address childhood experiences, and how does the suttas or the Buddha address, is this an objective thing? Misfortune? When I was 4 or 5, our house burned down, and I don't know how I would have formulated a story or a sense of being in the world. And when those experiences come up, or some of the other unpleasant things, to get a sense of how I can metabolize things that although I have some had responsibility even at a very young age, the capacities were whatever I was at that age, and that to let those go and keep coming more to a maturity or an age I like to express in the world.
We're always growing, as Walker says. We're always amending our truths and our opinions about what life is and how we should live it. And we're not responsible for what happened to us in our childhood, but we are responsible for the knowledge that lets us know how we are impacted by what happens to us in our childhood. And to realize that a lot of the quirky things we do and a lot of the fears we have and a lot of the opinions we have about other people were formed when we were 3 or 5 or 10. And that allows us to let them go easier because we realize that they were developed in the mind of an immature person. And so why am I holding myself? Do I go around seeking the opinions of 10-year-olds or 5-year-olds or 15-year-olds or 20-year-olds? Do I go around seeking the opinion? No, you don't, because you realize that there's an immaturity there. There's not a lot of life that has been lived at that time. So if I can appreciate that and understand that in others, then I should offer myself the same understanding. That's all. Okay. But to understand life beats on us until we stop letting it beat on us. So you're good. Unless you started the fire.
I was one of my siblings.
Okay. Well, even then, they're not at fault. They didn't set out saying, I'm going to burn the house down. They might have said, I'm going to, light this fire in the living room. I'm going to make a campfire in the living room because of a cowboy movie that I saw. I'm I'm going to cook some beans on it. All right. I'm going to read this sutta one more time because it's short. And while I'm reading it, I want you to begin to examine the contents of your own consciousness. Now, hopefully you've already been doing this forever, but let's do it again. Because until we continue to house clean, until we continue to get everything straight in the mind, we're going to be influenced unwholesomely by what is the content of consciousness. And like I said before, we don't really have any idea about all of the mud that was been thrown our way. We've forgotten most of it because we've tried to protect ourselves from our bad experiences. But it's just mud that's stuck. You know, we're carrying it around with us. And so this practice says, okay, this is time to let this go. This is time to become healthy. You know, become who you really are, not what you think you are because of how you do things. But to demonstrate who you really are to yourself and to others. Okay? Enraptured with lust, enraged with anger, blinded by delusion, overwhelmed with mind ensnared, people aim at their own ruin, at the ruin of others, at the ruin of both, and they experience mental pain and grief. But if lust, anger, and delusion are given up, see, it doesn't say you don't have it, it says, but you got to give it up. And why would you want it? You know, all of the agony and confusion that it causes. But if lust, anger, and delusion are given up, one aims neither at one's own ruin, nor at the ruin of others, nor at the ruin of both. So now what this is giving us is a grid, an evaluation process. As long as I'm living in the world and I'm still trying to hurt somebody else's feelings, trying to tell somebody else off, trying to do something hurtful to somebody, I haven't released those things from me. It's not that something's wrong with them. I haven't released those things from me. I'm still trying to hurt you with my words, with my stick, with my cane, with my fist, with my actions. I'm still trying to hurt you. Remember, there's nothing in here about the other person hurting me. What's in here is about me hurting the other person. Again, one aims neither at one's own ruin, nor at the ruin of others, nor at the ruin of both. And they experience, because of that, no mental pain and grief. Thus is Nibbana visible in this life. In this life. It's visible. That peace, that contentment that you have because you're not trying to change anybody else's mind about anything. Anybody else's truth about anything. You're not trying to hurt anybody else. You're not trying to hurt yourself. You're not trying to hurt anybody else. You're not trying to hurt yourself or anyone else at the same time. When you live this way, you witness Nibbana here. Okay, now that's what I want to drive in. This is the nail I want to drive in. And as I said the other day, if you are suffering, if you are in pain, mental pain, you're not practicing. Now I thought about that and I said, because somebody said something about, somebody had some comment, yes. And I said, now how can I say that better? Make that clearer. So I'll say it this way. that when you are suffering, look for what you are attached to. And then loosen, let go of your attachment to that thing that you are attached to. Because remember, the suffering occurs, the emotions occur, the discontent occurs, not when I have a feeling about something, but when I attach myself to that feeling. So look for what you're I want them to think better of me. That's what I'm attached to. And I find myself fighting for that want, right? I'm attached to them changing their minds about what they think about me. Well, I can't do that. They've got to change their minds about what they think about me. I can own, my responsibility is to listen to what people have to say, to make sure that I look through that, I comb through that message that somebody's giving me about what they think about me, to make sure that what they're saying has no truth to it from my point of view. Am I really doing this? Am I really a dishonest person? Am I really stealing something? Am I really putting out false propaganda? Am I really talking about someone in a hurtful way? When it's said, it's for me to listen and go, okay, no, that doesn't apply to me. And let it go. Not to change their mind. Okay. Let's meditate. Let's do some mind training. And again, it's important that we look at consciousness, look at our consciousness, and find things that we want to surgically remove, we want to uproot, get rid of. So some simple crib sheets to what we've been talking about. The first thing is, how do I get better at doing something? I do it more often. I make a habit of it. You know, one of the questions we can ask ourselves at the end of the day, and this is another thing to do too, at the end of the day, review. How did my day go? Did I keep my promises today? You know, why didn't I? Right? So review your behavior, evaluate, not judge, but evaluate. How was my behavior today? How did I treat people today? Every evening, by yourself, at your desk, how did I do today? And the reason that you want to do this is because remember that most things occur not because I have no control of them, but because I didn't control them. I let them go. I let the beast out the cage. And I didn't hold it back. I didn't stop it. I knew I didn't want to get angry, but what the hell? You know, so I've got to ask myself, why did I let the dog out? You know, why did I not hold him and keep him in the yard? Why did I let him out? Usually we don't ask these questions because we are afraid to see what the answer is. You know, because that might mean I'm a bad person because I let that anger out. But it's only when we ask those questions, we face those issues, that we move through them and past them and on to who we truly are authentically. And I feel your intention. I feel your wanting. So just keep Don't give up. Don't give up. But remember, it takes practice. It takes developing that habit, reviewing it every day. How did I do today? Why did I do what I did today? How can I do it better tomorrow? And coming into tomorrow and reaffirming before you get out of bed, today I'm going to love everybody I meet. Everybody. Everybody. May all beings be liberated from suffering. May all beings experience nibbana here and now. May they be happy. May they be peaceful. May they be healthy. Thank you so much.